The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as she stepped inside, her coat brushing against her arms. The warmth of the interior was a welcome contrast to the crisp autumn air outside. The rich aroma of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked pastries wrapped around her like an old, comforting memory. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes wander across the familiar little space, the worn wooden tables, the cozy armchairs by the windows, and the delicate string lights casting a golden glow. Her gaze drifted to a corner by the window, where a man sat alone, immersed in whatever was on his tablet. He was sharply dressed, a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, and the casual confidence in his posture immediately drew her attention. At first, she thought he was just another customer, someone unremarkable among the morning crowd. But then a strange sense of déjà vu hit her. The curve of his jaw, the way he tucked a strand of hair behind his ear, the subtle smile as he read something on the screen, it all felt painfully familiar. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it really be him? The boy she had loved so fiercely in her teenage years, the one whose laughter had once made her heart race, now sitting there like a stranger yet somehow exactly the same. She hesitated, a thousand thoughts swirling in her mind. How had life changed him? Would he even remember her? She fought the urge to rush to him, instead lingering near the counter, trying to appear casual as her stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. Then he looked up, and time seemed to pause. His eyes met hers, and in that instant, memories flooded back. Stolen glances in the schoolyard, secret notes passed under desks, the bittersweet ache of first love that never quite faded. The recognition in his gaze mirrored her own shock and wonder. A slow, almost incredulous smile spread across his face, and for a heartbeat, the years and distance melted away, leaving only the girl and the boy they once had been. He gestured to the empty chair across from him, his smile lingering like a quiet invitation. Come, sit. It's been, 10 years? His voice was calm, smooth, and carried a subtle authority she hadn't remembered from their school days. She hesitated, suddenly self-conscious, noticing the sharp contrast between his polished appearance and her own simple outfit. Yet something in the warmth of his eyes encouraged her to take the seat. As she settled into the chair, she couldn't stop herself from stealing glances at him. His hands, poised over the tablet, were steady and confident. The boy she had adored so long ago had transformed into a man who exuded power effortlessly. Yet, beneath that composure, there was a softness in his expression when he looked at her, a spark of the person he used to be. Do you remember that time we got caught in the rain after school? He asked, leaning back casually. His tone was teasing, but his eyes held a flicker of nostalgia. She laughed softly, the sound catching her by surprise. I thought you hated getting wet, she replied, remembering her teenage teasing and his stubbornness. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that stirred something long buried in her chest. The conversation flowed naturally, as if the years of silence had simply paused rather than erased their connection. They shared stories about family, work, and the small adventures that life had thrown at them, each anecdote revealing glimpses of who they had become. She noticed the subtle confidence in his speech, the careful way he framed his words, and the way people seemed to gravitate toward him even from across the room. There was a commanding presence that hadn't existed when he was a teenager, yet it didn't feel intimidating, just different, almost magnetic. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You know, it's funny, seeing you here, after all this time. You look wonderful. The compliment, simple yet sincere, made her cheeks flush. She tried to respond casually, but her words faltered, betraying the mix of surprise and emotion she felt. For a moment, they sat in a delicate silence, the bustling cafe fading into background noise. It was as though the years had folded over themselves, and they were teenagers again, sitting together in a shared world that belonged only to them. But beneath that nostalgic bubble, an unspoken tension lingered, a question of how much life had changed them, and whether the past could somehow weave itself into the present. The warm, familiar chatter of the cafe seemed to fade as he leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. There's something I should probably tell you, he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. She tilted her head, curious and a little anxious, sensing that whatever he was about to say could change everything between them. He took a slow sip of his espresso, setting the cup down with deliberate precision. I own the company you're applying to, he revealed, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The words hit her like a jolt of electricity. She blinked, stunned. The boy she had once adored, the one who had laughed with her under the summer sun and shared secret dreams in the hallways of their school, was now not just successful, but a billionaire, a boss with the kind of authority that could intimidate anyone. Her mind raced. She could feel her pulse in her throat, the cafe suddenly too small, too bright, too alive with possibility and fear. You own it," she stammered, barely finding her voice. The enormity of the revelation made the past and present collide in a dizzying swirl. She had pictured a reunion, yes, but never one complicated by wealth, power, and professional boundaries. He smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes, but there was also a sincerity that softened the edges of his revelation. "I thought it might be awkward if you found out after the interview," he said lightly, though she sensed the careful control in his words. "I wanted you to know, before any of that." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and charged. She studied him, the boy who had once been her world, now transformed into a man of influence and success. And yet, despite the sudden shift in power dynamics, something about his presence felt reassuringly familiar, the same spark of warmth, the same depth of understanding she had always cherished. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the table, trembling slightly. I don't even know what to say," she admitted, a mixture of awe and nervousness swirling within her. He reached across the table, his hand resting lightly near hers, a gesture that bridged the gap between past and present. In that moment, she realized that life's twists had brought them back together under circumstances neither of them could have imagined. The question now lingered unspoken. Could the bond they once shared survive the gap between the girl she had been and the billionaire boss he had become? She took a deep breath, letting the realization of who he had become sink in. The cafe around them seemed to blur, leaving just the two of them in a bubble where the past and present collided. His hand rested lightly near hers on the table, a small but grounding gesture, and for a moment, all her fears and uncertainties faded into the warmth of their shared history. "You've changed," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. It wasn't meant as a criticism, it was an observation, a recognition of the man he had become. "You're so different now," he chuckled, a low, reassuring sound that made her heart skip. "And you haven't changed at all," he replied, his eyes sparkling with mischief and admiration. "Still just as stubborn and beautiful as I remember." The compliment made her blush, a mix of embarrassment and delight fluttering through her chest. For the first time since they sat down, she allowed herself to truly look at him, not just the powerful, polished man before her, but the boy she had loved. She noticed the familiar warmth in his smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and the quiet kindness beneath the layers of authority and success. In that moment, the years apart seemed less daunting, the gap between their worlds not quite so insurmountable. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, and she felt the gravity in his gaze. "I've thought about this day for a long time," he confessed. "About seeing you again, about what it would feel like, and here you are." His words carried a weight she could feel in her bones, the kind of honesty that only comes from someone who has never stopped caring. Her heart raced, torn between excitement and uncertainty. Could they truly reconnect? Could the bond they once shared survive the layers of time, change, and the life he now led? She reached out, letting her fingers brush against his hand, feeling the warmth and reassurance of that small connection. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted, a small smile forming on her lips. "But I want to find out." He mirrored her smile, a spark of hope and possibility lighting his eyes. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said, his voice steady but gentle. And in that moment, as the cafe hummed softly around them, it felt like the beginning of something new, a second chance that neither of them had expected, but both had silently hoped for.